What is going on, guys? It is WrestleGamia here, back with another video. With the criticism that's being thrown at WWE 2K20 upon its release for its graphical downgrades, it's brought the question of what fans are willing to accept in a AAA game back to the forefront of people's minds. Now, of course, this isn't a new discussion. In recent years, games like No Man's Sky and Mass Effect Andromeda have been heavily criticized for being released in unfinished states. It's also true that the developmental cycle of the 2K series leaves the developers little time to work on each installment, as a new game has to be released every year. However, in a day and age where we can have almost photorealistic graphics in the NBA 2K series, WWE fans have been rightly infuriated by the seemingly lack of care shown to their own games. As we'll see today, wrestling games unfortunately have a long history of this, so be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell, because we're going to look at 10 of the worst character models in wrestling video game history. Number 1. CANDICE LERAE from WWE 2K20. To be honest, this whole list could have been filled with character models from this year's much maligned WWE 2K game, but in the interest of diversity, let's not do that. We can't ignore it completely though, so let's focus on one of its worst offenders. It's no secret that visual concepts have been hit by a lot of criticism by the fan base for its character models, and one of the NXT stars stands out above almost all the rest. Hint at the word almost. As you can see from the game, this model barely resembles CANDICE LERAE at all. In fact, if we didn't know it was her, we could swear this was supposed to be someone else entirely. Her face is completely off, and it captures none of the happy-go-lucky spirit of her character. Maybe she should follow the example of her NXT peers and demand a better deal next year, or be kept out of the game entirely if this is the way she's going to be presented. Number 2. RENEE Young from WWE 2K16 and 2K20. There have been many contenders for best horror game over the years. Some will argue that it's the David Lynch style nightmare of Silent Hill 2. Others will say it's the jump scare thrills of the Resident Evil series. Others still will only hear those who agree that it's the terrifying full immersion of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but one look at the character model from Mrs. John Moxley in WWE 2K16 can leave no doubt that there is no greater horror in the world. No eldritch beast or monster of the imagination could match this terror. Look at the cold dead eyes that stare straight out of the screen and into your soul. Recoil over the horrifying stilted facial expressions and voice recording. And even in later games, RENEE got no better treatment, as just look at her in the newest installment. She even took to Twitter herself to critique her model, saying, "These games do me dirty every year. Poor RENEE, you do deserve better." Number 3. Dana Brooke from WWE 2K17. Now we have to commend the developers for adding a little unintentional horror to 2K17, as they've included what can only be described as their version of the Bump in the Night DLC pack with Dana Brooke. Those eyes. It looks as if she can stare right through a man's soul. Luckily, Yuke's got it right the following year, making a huge improvement with her model. Number 4. Bill Goldberg from WCW/NWO Revenge. Just so we're not focusing entirely on WWE, let's take a look over at what WCW games were doing in the year 1998. As we can see, it didn't look too pretty. Unfortunately, this is an example of taking one of your biggest stars and giving them one of the world's worst faces in the game. This won't be the only time wrestling games have this problem, as you'll see later in the list. But Goldberg here looks terrible even by the N64's limited standards. The body dimensions seem okay, but why on earth would you give your angriest, most no-nonsense wrestler in the company a permanent cheesy grin on his face? Goldberg should have been given a menacing-looking face that would show he's ready to demolish his opponent at any given moment, not a face that looks like he just won a Chevrolet Impala in the sweepstakes. Number 5. Scott Norton from WCW/NWO Thunder. We're not sure words alone can describe this character model from the equally awful THQ game. This may very well be the worst character model ever seen in any wrestling game, so much so that we're considering just giving up and ending the list here. This is the PlayStation 1 generation of graphics, so it has to be looked at by the capabilities of its day, but geesh, this would have been unacceptable in any era. The face looks like it's been hastily glued on from another body and used in a horror video game. It goes without saying that this looks nothing like Scott Norton or any other human being for that matter. In fact, the closest comparison we can make is that freaky human-faced dog from the Donald Sutherland remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Look again and tell us you don't see it. Number 6. LANA from WWE 2K19. The 2K series may be getting the brunt of it in this video, but with examples like this it's more than justified. This one was so bad that the ravishing Russian actually took to Twitter to show her distaste for the way she was presented in the game, saying, "Who's this? Never have I worn that gear or wrestled with short hair, so I'm very confused who this woman is." And looking at the model, it's not hard to see why she felt this way. Lana is clearly a very beautiful woman, so the fact that 2K managed to make her look like RuPaul's Drag Race star Katya is almost an achievement in itself. In this generation of gaming, there really is no excuse for such poor character models. Number 7. Triple H from WWF Raw on Xbox and PC. WWF Raw was probably one of the worst games ever made. Not because there was any problems with graphics overall, and the game could be a slow bore at times, but because it hardly featured anything other than the wrestlers in one arena. In fact, it felt more like a demo than an actual full game. Now, we could talk about how bad the game is in another video, but for the meantime, let's concentrate on the character models. Now, whilst many of the models aren't too bad and an accurate representation of their real-life counterpart, such as the Hardy Boys as well as top superstars like Kane, The Undertaker, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, but when it came to modeling the cerebral assassin Triple H, developers anchoring might have left the cleaner in charge to create his model that day. Just what on earth happened to his face, and why is his nose modelled on Michael Jackson's? Seems like Chris Benoit also got the same treatment with an awfully rendered face. Number 8. Head from WWF Attitude. To be fair, this was intended as more of a comedy inclusion in the game, and there's no real way to do this character without it looking ridiculous, but regardless, it still looks ridiculous. Old school fans will still remember the glee of loading up WWF Attitude on the PlayStation, and seeing Al Snow's friend and advisor as a playable character. When selected, gamers were presented with a disembodied head, complete with a floating set of hands and feet below it. It's preposterous to watch Head doing moves on other wrestlers, and it does make for a lot of fun, but honestly, it would be an incomplete list without including this one. Number 9. Kevin Owens from WWE 2K16. There's nothing as obviously bad about this one as there are some other entries on this list, but it's more a combination of little things. There's the way his figure is just a little too slim, or the fact that his facial features fall just off the side of Uncanny Valley. It looks more like someone cosplaying as KO, and just screams wrong. This is made even more evident by the fact that there were creative wrestler versions of the Prize Fighter that year that actually looked better than the finished game model. When fans are having to do the developers' work for them, it's always a bad sign. And number 10, The Rock from WWE 2K20. And we're allowing ourselves just one more character from this year's 2K game because it's such a failure that it can't be ignored. Some of these character models could almost be forgiven in that it could be argued they are less high-profile characters and thus less man-hours and priority had been put into making them look just right. Surely it's more important to get the John Cenas and Roman Reigns of the game correct because more people will be playing as them. Well, that argument falls apart when you look at the Great One's character model for this year's game. Just look at a side-by-side comparison of his in-game image in WWE 2K18 compared to this year's, and the downgrade is immediately evident. 2K20's model looks like a cartoon caricature of the People's Champ, something that wouldn't be out of place in 2001's Legends of Wrestling for PlayStation 2. Like, how'd you guys even get The Rock wrong? He's probably the biggest star in wrestling history. There really is no excuse for that. Oh well, maybe next year we'll see them get it right. But there you have it guys, 10 of the worst looking character models in wrestling video game history. Have we missed any out? Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling video game content.